In the meantime, reactions have stirred a debate over the legality of freedom of speech for core members expressing their views on governance and national issues. This followed the viral video of a Lagos-based core member, Ushie Rita Uguamaye, who openly criticized President Bola Tinubu, calling him a terrible leader over the weekend. The youth core member expressed frustration over Nigeria's worsening economic conditions and questioned the government's efforts to alleviate citizens' hardship, an action that Ushie now claimed elicited threats from the authorities and an invitation to the Eti-Osa local government NYSC secretariat ahead of a panel hearing which never held due to the absence of the LGI. But a legal team hopes the matter dies a natural death, maintaining Ushie has not committed any offense but merely expressed frustration of an average Nigerian. Now, join us now to discuss this. We have Taiwo Hassan, popularly known as SOWETO, is a member of the Organising Committee and Bad Governance Movement in Lagos State. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Hassan. What's your perspective on the comments made by Temitope regarding the NYSC core member?
Well, I think we have to say first and foremost that the NYSC core member needs to be commended by all Nigerians for speaking out and for showing courage. Don't forget that for the past few months, we have had absolute silence across the country, despite the deplorable situation, in terms of living conditions. The labor unions, the student unions, civil society organizations, everybody have gone silent since the protest last year. So for you to have a young person speak up in the manner she has done, actually deserves, a whole lot of commendation. And that is why we have to say here today that if the NYSC leadership and management should decide to go after her, then they will be incurring the wrath of all Nigerians. She will never be left alone, because in speaking out, she's speaking, for all of us. And for those who are threatening her, including the aide to President Bola Tinubu, of course, it is not surprising. And this again shows the character of this regime. This regime is a despotic regime. President Tinubu is not just a terrible president. President Tinubu is a civilian despot. He is, a civilian president who has decided to deploy all of the necessary despotic measures that are often attributed to military regimes.
Why do you say that, Mr. Hassan?
Under his leadership of this country, over the past 2 years or thereabout, we have had a pushback, to civil liberties. We have had freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, everything eroded. For instance, now, those of us who are activists, we are facing egregious attacks on our civil liberties, many of which are not even known to the public. Many of us still have our phones and gadgets being monitored, they have been bugged. Many of us still have our families being threatened. Last year, on October 20, when civil society groups gathered around to commemorate the NSAS memorial, 22 protesters were severely beaten, brutalized, and sexually harassed by the police. And the president never for one day spoke up against this kind of issue. So this is the kind of country that we have had under the leadership of President Bola Tinubu. And that is why anything you call him today, whether he's a terrible president, he's a despot, these are factual statements. They are not statements that you now begin to ask whether somebody has evidence for them. The evidence for the failure and the terrible character of President Bola Tinubu's leadership of the country is evident, is present in our lives, in our living conditions, in the erosion of our civil liberties, in the fact that as Nigerians we are not safe. Just look at a few weeks ago when all of us had to start shouting because of the abduction, of the youth president of the Yoruba socio-cultural group, whose video came out, screaming for help, and yet the entire police force in this country could not rescue him. But when an activist or a young person speak up about the condition of this country, then before you know it, they know that person's house address and they begin to pursue the person. Look at Thomas Abiodun, who spoke out about the terrible nature of this government also last year. Look at how she was arrested here in Lagos and bundled over to Abuja in order to be tried, for a case of defamation. So what you have seen really in all different ramifications is that you have a despotic government. You have a government that is clueless, that is irresponsible to the interests of its citizens, and you have a government that is just interested in continuing to utilize the resources and the wealth of this country to benefit just a few people in government, while the rest of us are wallowing in hunger and poverty. And that is why the appropriate response, to the youth corpus, statement is for all of us as Nigerians to rise up and hit the street. A protest has become necessary again. We need to hit the street again and shut down the country to demand that the government should begin to address all of these issues.
Now, SOWETO, Nigeria is a democratic country. I mean, since 1999, we've had uninterrupted democratic experience, and the Nigerian Constitution does guarantee freedom of expression, Section 39 of the Nigerian Constitution. So how does Ushie Rita Uguamaye's case reflect broader concerns about government's intolerance for dissent in Nigeria? We've since moved from military to democracy. You would think after all these years of being democratic, we should be more tolerant towards dissent and freedom of expression. Why does it seem like we're taking a few steps back?
It's certainly because, over the years, we have seen a situation whereby the traditional structures for mass movement, for mass organizing and mass resistance, they have failed in their responsibility of keeping the Nigerian government on their toes. And to the extent of that failure, that's why you have seen this kind of audacity from the government to continue to erode civil liberties, to continue to attack the right of citizens to even enjoy the most basic, the most modest democratic right. I think what we have seen in the past few years is more of a function of how civil society organizations, labor unions have failed to do their job of holding government to account. That is what has led to this audacity. And this will continue to go on and on until the labor unions, civil society organizations, were able to get our hearts together to ensure that this attempt to turn Nigerians into slaves in their own country is stopped, in its track. And that would require serious mobilization, serious organizing. We would have to ensure that, we stick to fighting hard on some of these issues, not just fighting for a few days and leaving the street and then hoping that we come back again. Because, what you are talking about really is that this government, you have a government that is simply interested in utilizing the resources of the country in a certain way, not to, take care of the interests of the mass majority, but rather, they see the wealth of the country as something to steal, as something, to use to finance their own lifestyle and all of that. So in that sense, the whole idea of attacking democratic rights, of attacking civil liberties, is a function of the fact that, for a government that steals the resources of the country, for a government that is not using the resources of the country to develop infrastructures and to create jobs, to be able to continue to do that, you must keep, the citizens, you must keep them enslaved, you must keep them afraid. And that is the role that all of these attacks of democratic rights and all of that is playing. So keep us unable to ask questions and unable to demand for our rights.
Thank you so much for your insights and for joining us this morning on News Now, Taiwo Hassan. Do appreciate your time.
Thanks for it.
Thank you.